Hey traders, welcome back to the channel. So I had an interesting request. This is not something I get every day, but I had another coach refer one of his traders to me and said, Mike, good trader. I have a lot of big aspirations for him. Does pretty well, but he just hops on a lot of strategies. He's always moving to different ones, and I can't make heads or tails over it. If he just stick to some core strategies, I think he would do a lot better. Can you help? Absolutely. Have you ever been involved in strategy hopping? I mean, we all have to a certain degree, and we kind of justify that it's legitimate reason why to do it. But when it gets out of control, it really impacts the profit factors and also the success of the trader itself, at least in most cases. Let's take a deep dive on how I approach this one. It's a kind of a serious thing, and it's a seven-figure trader. Want to make sure he can get to the next level. Let me give the coach some advice on what to advise him. All right, so an interesting request. I love working with other coaches and risk managers from other firms, and I find I can add value, but at the same time, not really step over their toes. I think that's sort of like my sweet spot, working together for a common goal. So when I looked at this trader and he gave me some of his specs, he says, great, just does a lot of strategy hopping, and he's kind of one of the more profitable traders at the firm. So they're kind of treating him with kid gloves, but at the same time, they kind of want to take a stand. So that's sort of my objective here, at least in this assignment. So the first thing I asked them to do was to provide me with a SWOT assessment. And I asked for the coach to do this so I can review it. All right. What I want to know is sort of what their strengths are and their weaknesses. I want to get a little more in-depth idea of what this trader is all about. Obviously, he has some success, but I want to take a little deeper dive and say, what's behind this strategy hopping? All right. So I took a look at strengths, and I have it right in front of me here. It says, can follow a plan, no fear of pushing the button. Cool stuff. Discipline, solid risk management plan, and sticks to it. Preaching to the choir. Loves trading and knows he'll be successful one day. Interesting. And the fact that I would think, based on some of his numbers, he's already successful. But I love that sort of entrepreneurial spirit where he just doesn't feel like he's at his level. Right? He's a full-time trader and adds to his trading account regularly, which is cool. So it's important to know that. And the reason why I read this, I say, what does that matter? Because I'm getting the impression that this trader is trading from a sort of space of abundance. All right. He's adding to his account, and he seems like he's a very stable person in his household as far as financially. So it's not like he has to trade to eat every week. That's a pretty big thing, a pretty big concern of mine too. So that's pretty cool in the strengths. So let's look at some of the sort of weaknesses that he talked about. He says the general normal weaknesses. Again, I want to clarify with the coach what that means. He's comfortable with strategies, but they just weren't consistent. Okay, so that's an interesting point. So what I want to find out is how he defines consistency. Is it a win streak? Is it just over a series of trades? Seems like gets very frustrated over small losses. All right. Maybe it's a question of, accepting loss, right? He just wants to have a high win rate. All right. We'll find out. Now, he says further, he gets frustrated after the first daily candlestick against him in a trade. Okay. So that's very interesting. So we're kind of getting a little more information about this trader, about maybe his ability to accept losses. By the way, newsflash, we're in the business of accepting losses. So while you may be good at what you do, we have to sort of work on, and this may be some type of maybe psychological training as well, success management training, where we want him to be comfortable with losses and understand that it's part of the success process. Talks here, his results are less because he sometimes takes profits too early. Okay, so now we're sort of painting a picture. By the way, is this any of the traders that we're talking to do this? I mean, we all do this to an extent. Put your comments below. Let me know, how did you overcome it? All right. Do you take profits too early? Like this gentleman. Gets frustrated after the first daily candlestick against him. Maybe you're trading and scalping. What about after that first 5-minute bar goes against you? How do you feel? Okay, so based on what I have, the knowledge, and I don't believe I'm assigned to meet with this trader unless they want to engage in that regard. But this is going to be my approach, at least to start with. I want to, number one, validate the strategies that the others were trading at the firm. So he's strategy hopping, and these strategies are valid strategies that other traders are trading. So I want to get into the forensics of, okay, what do the back tests show? What are the other traders doing? What's their profit margins? So I want to really go back to this thing. This is something that was really a stickler when I was reading is he says he just wasn't consistent. So I want to get a deep dive in what the definition of consistency is, all right? Because some of the other traders seem to be working out, but we'll see. Maybe there's something to it. Second, I want to validate his comfort with the strategies and that profitability is the only issue. So I think one of the things, and I could say this respectfully, I'll put this in my report to the coach, is that we want to make sure that just because he's hopping, it's not like a bad thing or like his fault, all right? Maybe you're just hopping because you're trying to find a strategy that you're comfortable with or fits sort of your jam, all right? Maybe other traders who are scalpers, they're fine with maybe scalping strategies. Well, he's frustrated after the first daily candlestick. That also is a tell, daily candlestick. So is it a swing trader that gets frustrated with, or is he a scalper that's trying to trade sort of, and I see this a lot, with the firm's sort of regulations or their style, right? It's a sort of like a round peg, square hole. Again, we don't have all the answers, but these are some of the things I'm going to kind of dip deeper in. It's usually, and I find that the first one to blame is like the trader, for hopping. But maybe there's a valid reason. Maybe they're just trying to find, a sort of a home that's in their comfort zone. And once we do that, we'll nail it. But I want to dig more into this sort of consistency issue. All right. So I want to make sure that, profitability isn't the only issue. All right. Is it something where he's just not comfortable trading a certain style? Or you'd be amazed. Sometimes firms, even the top firms, they kind of sort of force feed certain strategies that conform to the company culture, but just is outside the comfort of the trader. So we want to see, I may have to do a little sort of hand-holding to sort of marry the two together. We'll see. Obviously, it's a profitable trader, so I would hope that the firm would sort of respect that and understand that maybe their culture is a little too tight. We don't know yet, though. All right, we'll see. I want to also dig into the mindset. This whole idea of, he says just wasn't consistent. After what? All right, after 2 trades, after series, I want to look at the journals to see when he hopped. Did he start hopping after a series of losing trades? And what was that series? A series of 100, where he had maybe 70 losses out of 100? Or was it after 2 trades? Were the market conditions supporting the shift into his strategy? So maybe it was like a dull market, so we went more into scalp mode or something, or a strategy that involved mostly scalping. Sounds good to me. I mean, that's actually what good traders do. I also want to dig deeper into this mindset in the sense of what was the source of the strategies where they sort of force-fed to him? Was he in a trading group that he learned the strategies from? Does he trust the source of the strategy? That's a key point that I always like to dig deeper. Was it a back test? It said, hey, this back test works, trade this. I'm not sure. So the next thing I want to do is take a deep dive into, was there anything in the past where he sort of lost money, or did he have a business venture that failed, or even just a household where money was scarce? This idea of taking profits too early, there may be something more to it. Now, again, if you're just starting as a developing trader, we all do that. But if you have times where you're a 7-figure trader, and now I think he's mid sixes, you obviously got there for a reason, but you have something that's in your favor. But is there something else why you're taking profits too early? Is it, this sort of fear of loss, which, believe me, even big traders have sort of fear of loss. Maybe it's size that's raising the bar. Maybe the firm is increasing their size too rapidly and he's sort of like taking profits too early. See where we're going here? I mean, I want to be open to all the other ideas, and I want to be able to work with his coach, mentor, trading partners, and even his firm risk manager to see if there's anything we can do. All right. I also want to know, how does his bosses, risk manager, firm, however that does, assess his work? All right. Is he the first one to get there, last person to leave? That's great. I love the dedication. But if I have a firm and I got a person who's just making donuts every day and doing it consistently, if he needs a break, give him a break. All right. So I want to sort of understand the culture of the firm. And this is where sometimes my role is maybe limited. Like, hey, Mike, don't go there. We really just want you to assess the trader. But my job as a professional is to sort of open the door to at least invite further discussions, even if I'm not a part of it. All right. But I want to see what his supervisor said, both at the firm and even prior, to say, maybe there's some skill sets there that he works better in teams. Or, you know what? He's great, but you just leave him alone in the corner and he just gets the job done better, right? That could be sort of a cultural mix that I want to sort of bring into the picture. Normally, when you're a developing trader, I'm not that concerned about this. I mean, there's always going to be trading from scarcity and things like that. But when you're at that level, we need to sort of tap into some of these personal things that you want to make sure there's nothing behind that. All right. And if the firm has the budget to have a psychology coach or one on staff, which I don't believe this firm does. So we'll see if we can sort of work in that regard. But again, I'm just trying to poke the elephant here, see if I can do a deep dive. I'm in the identification process here, and that's really what my role is here, to hand it over to them to take it to the next level. How many traders are in this situation where you're doing okay, but you have these sort of setbacks and you maybe have some profit runs, but as soon as you get into like a losing streak, boom, you want to switch strategies. I see it a lot. I see it within our own members sometimes, and maybe it's volatile conditions that we had recently where they want to shift. But sometimes you look back and say, the original core strategies were designed to sort of be shock absorbers to volatility. So I'm always a little concerned on the risk side of this hopping. How many people have done that? Let me know what your experience is, and more importantly, let me know how you were able to overcome it, if you're able to. All right, so I asked for the summary report of the one-on-one call that the coach had with this trader, and I said I'd like to take a look at it. In trading, the strategies tend to fail. I need better strategies. Okay, so this is also questioning this, where these strategies sort of like corporate driven, where I say like, you do these strategies. So I want to probe that area, or at least identify to the coach, hey, there may be a disconnect between the strategies that the trader is comfortable with and just meets his sort of risk tolerance versus the ones that are sort of being force fed within the sort of portfolio of the firm. So that's interesting to ask. The wording that the trader uses is somewhat very unique and says a lot. Next, he was asked to describe better strategies, and he said he'd like to have a higher win rate that makes money. Okay, now this is really interesting because now he's basically saying what he's most comfortable in. He likes a higher win rate. That's great, all right? Don't we all? Well, not all traders like that, right? Ultimately, they want a higher profit factor, and so does the firm. So there may be a conflict between what the strategy will generate, such as maybe an option strategy, which sometimes you only have like a 25% win rate, but you can have a very high profit margin and involves holding and trailing and things like that. But he's just saying right here, I'd like a higher win rate. All right, I want strategy to make a higher win rate and makes more money. Well, don't we all? So, but he's kind of narrowing this box, saying, okay, very interesting. All right, so lastly, I want to connect his performance metrics, what the firm is measuring him on versus his trading performance. What seems to be sort of the problem here, okay? We'll all want the most out of our traders. I oversee a managed account as well, and I want the best, and I want the traders to sort of optimize their performance. But there's a lot of moving parts here. There's a lot of personal things, a lot of emotionals. So I want to connect the performance metrics and make sure they're measuring his work, his trading performance in the proper way, okay? I don't have that information, so that's what I'm going to suggest for the coach to either provide to me, or if he wants, look into that to say, look, the bottom line is you have a winner on your team. We want to do the most to optimize his performance and obviously optimize his pay as well. But there's sort of an uncle point where you don't want it to affect sort of the relationship or, make an unhappy trader, because an unhappy trader is one that's, is basically not going to perform well. So we want to take care of that. Okay, so what are my final solutions? All right, we'll go right down the bullet list. I'll read them right off. Right. Focus on metrics, process, profit margin. What's going on there, right? Let's take a look and see how we're doing. Be happy to look at them. At the same time, if you have a trading coach or an accountability partner, you can give it to them. What are the results that are happening? Focus on the process. There seems to be a lot of words of profit here, at least from the firm that he's talking about. All right, I want to redefine his definition of consistent. Seems to be a high win rate. All right, consistency really, you have to make sort of a mindset shift, is ultimately profit margin. And if his numbers are there, which seems like it is, we want to make sure he has those and he doesn't need to hop to do that. If we change that focus, he may realize, you know what? Yeah, I shouldn't hop. This is giving me the highest margin, even though my win rate is low. I may be a little uncomfortable. I either may have to adjust, or we may just accept, okay, use the high strategy with the high win rate. That's okay. And we'll live with that because he's obviously doing okay. I also suggested the coach show him traders with high win rates who then ended up quitting. All right. So to understand that high win rate is, not the end all. All right. There are a lot of traders who have a high win rate and then give up. So understand that, there may be sort of give and take there, but I'm curious to see what the mindset is of this trader. I also suggested that his coach or his trading partner color code his journal in blocks of 75, because what happens is that will also visually help assess things in bigger chunks, in bigger series. If he's hopping over 3 or 4 trades, which it seems like it was the case, I want to color code those into series. So you're looking at sort of a bigger picture and a bigger sample size. And then if you have to hop or change, then we can make an assessment. But if you're looking at it visually, a little trick like that helps the trader sort of say, oh, well, okay, I had 3 or 4 losing trades, but I'm not done with my series yet. Okay, it's just a little like a psychological visual hack that seems to work out pretty well. All right, and in those lines, I want to summarize the results after a series of, say, 75 trades. So the sort of journal is not going to have win-loss or results up until 75, and they have a little sort of like column D and E of sort of the results with the win rate, all right, as opposed to individual trades. It will soften the blow of this sort of having to change things after 3 or 4 trades. All right, the next thing I'm going to suggest is have your trading partner actually complete your trade journal. One, they can act as an accountability person to identify things that maybe you're not aware of, but also it takes that sort of granular sort of look into each trade, especially when you're putting in a journal and you see 2 or 3 losers, you're like, oh, yeah, and it makes you start thinking about things. Delegate that to the fellow trader and let them handle it, and then you can discuss it together with the risk manager of the firm or the coach or even the other trader after a series, preferably say 75 or so, and then you can assess it as a series. I think it's worth a shot, and it's worked well in the past in some other students that I've had. All right, next, I want to set rules in place that permit the ability to shift strategies. Now, like I said earlier, sometimes shifting strategies is a good thing because you're changing it based on market conditions. Slow markets, maybe I'll scalp more versus trail, things like that. But this particular trader had literally been changing strategies all the time, even after a series of 2 or 3 losses. So what I want to do is to have rules in place that sort of permit you to shift the strategy. It could be market conditions. The volatility is up high. Okay, we can shift from this strategy to that. But if not, to really get permission or not allow one to shift on a strategy that provides consistent edge over time. All right. And clearly his compliance has been not an issue. It's one of his strengths. So I'm not worried about him sort of breaking rules. So give him permission, because right now the firm just says, do what you want. Let's put some rigid rules in there to say, okay, look, you want to shift, but why? What was the catalyst for that change? Let's see how that goes. So I did a sort of a high-level assessment of his journal. I didn't do a complete analytic work because that wasn't really part of the scope of this assignment. But when I looked at his journal, I realized that when I put them in clumps, he had losing streaks. I mean, we all do. But when I put him in clumps to 75, there were 8 sections, and he was successful and decent profit margins on all 8. So I'm going to question, hey, what's your definition of a strategy not working? Because clearly it's working. I think it's really more focused on each individual trade. So all these suggestions I'm doing is sort of take the step back and look at things in the bigger picture. And lastly, I put an open-ended question there. I want his coach to focus more in his one-on-ones on probing a little more about this fear of loss. A lot of times when we strategy hop, and you can let me know in the comments below, let me know what you think, but when we strategy hop, it's because of this fear of loss. We've had some setbacks, or we had even sometimes 1 or 2 losing trades, and you're like, oh, that strategy doesn't work. Let me go to this one. And then, they find some on YouTube or something, and next thing you know, it works a little bit, then it doesn't, and then they go back, blah, 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 blah. Or their fellow trader was working on the original strategy they were on, and they were crushing it. And they said, why are you not crushing it? Oh, I switched strategies, all right? We've all been there, okay? I mean, I've been doing this a while. I do it too sometimes. So understand, is there a fear of loss there? And understand that, sometimes traders really have a higher fear of loss when it comes to managed capital than they do their own. Have you ever had that where, maybe you've got an opportunity to trade your own capital, then you go maybe past a few challenges and your style changes? Most people think they sort of gamble on the funded trading, but no, they actually treat that with kid gloves, and they're a little more aggressive in their own personal ones. It's kind of a bizarre thing that I've learned over the years and seen where traders, they should respect firm capital. That's what they're designed to do. But is there such a fear to where there's a fear of loss, which is impacting his ability to execute his strategy, his number one strategy, the best he can? So something I want the coaches to look at, and that's sort of the open-ended one, where if they need me to do a deeper dive, I'll be happy to assist them in that area. All right, so I hope you got this sort of in-depth perspective of a funded trader, all right, that is sort of deviating a little bit from the core plan that him and his firm want him to do. So an interesting case study. I'm going to finish my report today, send it to the coach, and see where they take it, and hopefully they can keep me posted on his progress and some of the changes that they're making for him and at the firm to make sure he reaches his peak performance as a trader. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this little in-depth discussion on strategy hopping. I think we all do it to an extent. We're all guilty, but it can be a serious thing in a case like this, even for a profitable trader. All right, click on the link below. I'll give you sort of my cheat sheet that I gave to the coach of this firm to let them know is what are the rules and permissions that you have that allow you to strategy hop and when you can't do it. All right, take a look at that. Hope you enjoyed this one, and we'll see you next time.